Tonight on the Grant Caldwell Report, a rapidly escalating global security crisis is demanding urgent attention. Before we begin, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss critical updates as this story continues to develop. Because what we're about to break down could reshape the balance of power in the Middle East, and potentially far beyond. Israel is signaling what officials describe as a firm red line against Iran's expanding ballistic missile program, according to multiple international reports. Governments, military analysts, and global observers are now warning that tensions between the two regional powers may be entering a far more dangerous phase. But what exactly triggered this escalation, and why are experts saying the consequences could be global? According to reporting from USA Today and international coverage including the BBC, Israeli officials have raised serious concerns about Iran's missile capabilities, particularly regarding potential limits, or the lack of them, in ongoing regional security discussions. At the same time, political analysts and regional experts, including commentary featured by Democracy Now!, argue the situation reflects deeper strategic tensions that have been building for years. But there is a critical distinction that must be made. Some developments are confirmed through official statements and public reporting. Other claims about intentions, timelines, and potential military responses remain uncertain. And the unanswered questions may be the most important part of this story. Because behind the headlines about missiles lies a much bigger issue. Who ultimately controls security in one of the world's most volatile regions? And what happens if diplomacy fails? Israeli leadership has repeatedly described Iran's military expansion as an existential concern. Iranian officials, meanwhile, have historically defended their weapons programs as necessary for national defense. Both positions are well documented. But what happens when those competing claims collide in real time? And perhaps more importantly, who holds the power to prevent escalation? This is not just a regional dispute. The implications could affect global energy markets, international alliances, and the stability of multiple governments. The stakes are enormous, the risks are real, and the timeline may be shorter than many realize. What the public has been told so far, and what remains unclear, reveals a deeper story about power, deterrence, and accountability in global security. And the confirmed facts paint a far more complex picture than many headlines suggest. Israel's position on Iran's missile program did not emerge overnight. The current tensions follow years of escalating warnings, military assessments, and diplomatic pressure, much of it documented through official statements and international reporting. According to reporting from USA Today, Israeli officials have recently emphasized the need to restrict or limit Iran's ballistic missile capabilities as part of broader regional security concerns. Israeli leadership has long argued that Iran's missile program represents a direct threat to its national security, particularly because of the range and potential payload capacity of these weapons. Those concerns have been repeated in public statements from Israeli defense and government officials over multiple years. Iran, for its part, has consistently defended its missile development as a sovereign right and a necessary element of national defense. Iranian officials have maintained that their missile program is not subject to negotiation, arguing that it serves as a deterrent against external threats. This position has been publicly stated by Iranian leadership and has remained largely unchanged in recent diplomatic discussions. The BBC reports that tensions between Israel and Iran have intensified amid broader regional instability and ongoing disputes involving Iran's military capabilities. These tensions exist alongside concerns about Iran's regional influence, including its support for allied groups across the Middle East, which Israeli officials have described as part of a wider security challenge. Meanwhile, international negotiations surrounding Iran's broader military and nuclear activities have struggled to produce lasting agreements. Previous diplomatic frameworks primarily focused on nuclear development, while Iran's ballistic missile program has remained a major point of contention between regional actors and global powers. According to expert analysis featured by Democracy Now!, some regional analysts argue that the current confrontation reflects long-standing geopolitical competition between Israel and Iran, rather than a single triggering event. Experts suggest the dispute is rooted in competing security doctrines, regional influence, and differing interpretations of deterrence. What is confirmed is that both governments continue to publicly assert their positions. Israel has repeatedly warned of potential consequences if Iran's military capabilities expand beyond what it considers acceptable security thresholds. Iran continues to reject external limits on its missile development. However, there is no publicly confirmed timeline for military action, and no official declaration of imminent conflict has been issued by either side. Diplomatic channels remain active and international observers continue to monitor developments closely. And yet the official statements alone do not fully explain the growing alarm among analysts, or why some experts believe the current standoff reveals deeper contradictions between public messaging and strategic reality. The public statements from both sides present clear positions. But when those claims are compared with the broader strategic reality, a more complicated picture begins to emerge. Israel's leadership has consistently framed Iran's missile development as a direct and existential threat. Officials argue that expanding missile capabilities, particularly longer-range systems, could significantly alter the region's military balance. These warnings are presented as defensive in nature, focused on preventing future risk rather than responding to immediate attack. At the same time, critics and regional analysts note that Iran maintains its missile program primarily as a deterrent. Iranian officials argue that their military posture reflects decades of external pressure, sanctions, and regional security threats. From this perspective, limiting missile development could weaken Iran's ability to defend itself against potential adversaries. These competing narratives reveal a fundamental contradiction. Each side describes its own actions as defensive while viewing the other's actions as aggressive. That dynamic has defined much of the Israel-Iran relationship for years. Expert commentary highlighted by Democracy Now! Includes analysis suggesting that the current crisis reflects broader geopolitical rivalry rather than a single policy dispute. Some analysts argue that regional power competition, security alliances, and influence across neighboring countries all contribute to the present tensions. Others suggest that international diplomatic frameworks have failed to address core security concerns held by both sides. There are also unresolved questions about enforcement and verification. Even where diplomatic agreements have existed in the past, disputes have often emerged over compliance, interpretation, and oversight. These gaps have contributed to ongoing mistrust and periodic escalation. What remains unclear is whether current warnings represent a negotiating position, a strategic signal, or preparation for more concrete action. Officials have issued strong statements, but public reporting does not confirm specific operational plans or timelines. And that uncertainty matters. Because in international security conflicts, perception often shapes reality. Strategic messaging, public warnings, military posturing, and diplomatic pressure can influence behavior even without direct confrontation. Analysts note that such signaling may be intended to deter escalation, reassure allies, or test international response. But signaling also carries risk. Misinterpretation, miscalculation, or unintended escalation can transform rhetoric into action. And this raises a deeper question. Beyond the public statements and strategic messaging, who ultimately shapes the decisions that could determine whether tensions ease or intensify? Behind the public statements and strategic messaging lies a deeper issue, the question of decision-making power and accountability in a conflict that could affect millions. In Israel, national security policy is shaped by a combination of elected leadership, defense officials, and military advisors. Decisions regarding potential responses to regional threats typically involve coordination between political leaders and the country's security establishment. Israeli officials have repeatedly emphasized their responsibility to prevent what they view as emerging threats before they materialize. Iran's system operates differently, but carries its own centers of authority. Military strategy and weapons development involve multiple institutions, including political leadership and powerful security organizations. Iranian officials have consistently framed their defense posture as necessary for national sovereignty and regional influence. These parallel structures create a situation where decisions on both sides are driven by internal security calculations, often with limited transparency to the international community. International actors also play a role. Global powers and regional partners maintain strategic alliances, economic relationships, and security commitments that influence the broader environment. Diplomatic pressure, sanctions, and military cooperation all shape how the situation evolves. International negotiations over Iran's military capabilities have involved multiple countries, yet disagreements over enforcement and scope have limited lasting resolution. Analysts note that institutional dynamics can sometimes intensify tensions. Military planners prepare for worst-case scenarios. Political leaders face domestic pressure to demonstrate strength. Strategic doctrines emphasize deterrence and credibility. Each of these factors can narrow the space for compromise. At the same time, critics of international diplomacy argue that global institutions have struggled to manage escalating security disputes. Negotiations often move slowly, enforcement mechanisms remain limited, and competing national interests frequently complicate collective action. The result is a system where responsibility is distributed across governments, institutions, and alliances, yet accountability can remain unclear when tensions rise. And the consequences of these decisions are not abstract. Policy choices made by officials and institutions have direct effects on regional stability, economic security, and public safety. Military escalation would carry risks not only for Israel and Iran, but for neighboring countries and global markets. Which leads to the question that matters most to ordinary citizens watching this crisis unfold. What does this confrontation mean for the public, both in the region and around the world? For ordinary citizens, the impact of rising tensions between Israel and Iran extends far beyond diplomatic statements or military strategy. The consequences of escalation could affect public safety, economic stability, and global security in ways that reach well outside the Middle East. One immediate concern involves regional stability. Heightened military tensions increase the risk of conflict that could disrupt daily life for millions of people living across the region. Even without direct confrontation, prolonged uncertainty can affect infrastructure, commerce, and access to essential resources. Economic effects are another major consideration. The Middle East plays a central role in global energy markets, and instability in the region can influence oil prices, supply chains, and financial markets worldwide. Analysts often warn that geopolitical uncertainty alone can create economic ripple effects, increasing costs for businesses and consumers across multiple countries. There is also the broader issue of public trust. When governments issue warnings about security threats, citizens rely on transparent information and responsible decision-making. Uncertainty surrounding military capabilities, strategic intentions, and diplomatic negotiations can create anxiety among populations already facing complex global challenges. Security experts also emphasize the risks of miscalculation. In high-tension environments, even limited incidents, military exercises, technical errors, or unintended confrontations can escalate rapidly if communication channels fail or intentions are misunderstood. Preventing such outcomes typically requires sustained diplomatic engagement and clear lines of communication between adversaries. For neighboring countries, the stakes can be particularly high. Regional conflicts often have spillover effects, including humanitarian challenges, displacement of civilians, and broader security concerns. International organizations frequently prepare contingency plans in response to rising tensions, reflecting the potential scale of impact. Beyond immediate risks, the situation also raises longer-term questions about global security frameworks. How effectively international systems manage disputes between rival powers may shape public confidence in global governance and collective security efforts. And for viewers watching this unfold, one question remains unavoidable. If current tensions continue to rise, what happens next, and what signals should the world be watching for? For ordinary citizens, the impact of rising tensions between Israel and Iran extends far beyond diplomatic statements or military strategy. The consequences of escalation could affect public safety, economic stability, and global security in ways that reach well outside the Middle East. One immediate concern involves regional stability. Heightened military tensions increase the risk of conflict that could disrupt daily life for millions of people living across the region. Even without direct confrontation, prolonged uncertainty can affect infrastructure, commerce, and access to essential resources. Economic effects are another major consideration. The Middle East plays a central role in global energy markets, and instability in the region can influence oil prices, supply chains, and financial markets worldwide. Analysts often warn that geopolitical uncertainty alone can create economic ripple effects, increasing costs for businesses and consumers across multiple countries. There is also the broader issue of public trust. When governments issue warnings about security threats, citizens rely on transparent information and responsible decision-making. Uncertainty surrounding military capabilities, strategic intentions, and diplomatic negotiations can create anxiety among populations already facing complex global challenges. Security experts also emphasize the risks of miscalculation. In high-tension environments, even limited incidents, military exercises, technical errors, or unintended confrontations can escalate rapidly if communication channels fail or intentions are misunderstood. Preventing such outcomes typically requires sustained diplomatic engagement and clear lines of communication between adversaries. For neighboring countries, the stakes can be particularly high. Regional conflicts often have spillover effects, including humanitarian challenges, displacement of civilians, and broader security concerns. International organizations frequently prepare contingency plans in response to rising tensions, reflecting the potential scale of impact. Beyond immediate risks, the situation also raises longer-term questions about global security frameworks. How effectively international systems manage disputes between rival powers may shape public confidence in global governance and collective security efforts. And for viewers watching this unfold, one question remains unavoidable. If current tensions continue to rise, what happens next? And what signals should the world be watching for? The stakes surrounding this moment cannot be overstated. What we are witnessing is not just another cycle of headlines about missiles, diplomacy, or regional tensions. This is a turning point that could reshape the balance of power across the Middle East for years to come. Decisions being made right now behind closed doors will influence global security, energy markets, military alliances, and the daily lives of millions of people. As pressure mounts over Iran's missile capabilities, as Israel signals firm red lines, and as international voices debate the path forward, one reality is becoming increasingly clear. The world is entering a period of heightened uncertainty, where every move carries consequences. Miscalculation could trigger escalation, diplomacy could shift the trajectory, and the global community is watching closely to see which path prevails. The Grant Caldwell Report will continue tracking every development, every strategic move, and every critical shift as this story unfolds. Because in times like these, understanding the full picture isn't optional, it's essential. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure you like this video, share your perspective in the comments, and subscribe to the Grant Caldwell Report so you never miss the updates that matter most. Stay informed, stay aware, and stay prepared.